Hello, my name is Todd Miranda. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to create a wet floor effect in Microsoft Expression Blends 2. We're going to be using Microsoft Expression Blends 2. So let's begin by getting ourselves a little bit more space in our work area. Let's go to Tools, Options, and let's bring our workspace zoom down to about 85%. That'll give us a little bit more room. Then we'll choose File, New Project. We're going to choose a WPF application project, and let's put it in our folder, and we'll name it. We'll just call this Wet Floor Effect. Alright. And we had chosen C#, Visual C# there, but since we're not going to write any code, we're just strictly going to be using the XAML. It won't really matter what language that we're using. So let's go down here and let's click and hold your mouse button down and drag down to decrease our size of our layout a little bit there so we can see more. And let's begin by setting the background of our layout root. So let's go to Properties. We'll set the background to a gradient brush, and we're going to slide our sliders over. We're going to add another one, and I'm going to set my red, my green, and my blue to 0. So you can see here that I have set red, green, and blue to 0, and I've got 3 gradient offsets. The 2 outside ones are black, and the one in the middle is just some kind of a nice gray color. All right, nothing too special there about the color that I chose. And the only reason that I'm doing this is it often enhances the wet floor look if you give some kind of indication of floor and then wall behind it. It kind of gives just kind of enhances the effect a little bit. Okay, so I've just moved our 2 gradient offsets a little bit closer together, and now I'm going to add an image. First thing I need to do is add an image to the project. So I'm going to choose my Project tab. I'm going to right click on my project, and I'm going to do Add Existing Item. And I'm just going to open up the Sample Pictures folder, and we'll choose a picture out of here. Let's choose the green sea turtle, and do OK. Now there's a couple ways I can add an image to my form. I can obviously go over here to the toolbox and find my image control, and if you don't see the image control, click here on your asset library, and then you can look through your asset library and select the image control. Or if you don't see your image control here, you can come up to the search window and you can type in image and search for the image and add it to your toolbox. So now we can click on the image and we can draw that image here in the form. Or an easier way to do that is just to take your image and drag it directly on the form. That will create an image control and add the image to it. Alright, so let's go to our Properties tab, and we're going to scroll down to the Transform group, and we're going to select Scale Transform. And we're just going to set the X and Y to about 0.3 each. And that should give us a nice scale for our image. So now let's take the image and we're going to just place it somewhere around the middle of the form, up a little bit higher on the form. And now there's our image that we want to create the wet floor look with. So let's do a Control C or right click copy, and then a Control V or a paste, and now we've got our second image. So let's drag our second image down and put it just below the top image. Now what you want to achieve here is just a little bit of a line between the 2 images. So you want just a little bit of space between the 2 images, and that gives the wet floor look just a really nice appearance. Now we've got to take this lower image, we're going to select that image, and let's go to our Render Transform. Let's choose Rotate, and let's just type in 180 degrees into the angle. All right, so that flips at 180 degrees. And then if we go down here to the flip, we choose flip, and we're going to choose the flip on the x-axis. And that flips our lower image. And that effectively gives us our mirror image. All right, so now we have our mirror. Now, very rarely, even in the shiniest floor, do you get a reflection of the full image. And even if you did get a reflection of the full image, you wouldn't get a completely opaque reflection of the image. So let's select this lower image, and let's go up to our brushes and make sure that we choose opacity mask, and let's choose the gradient brush. Alright, now we're going to go into one of our gradient offsets, and we're going to set the opacity to 0. So now you see what we've done is we've created an opacity mask that goes from full opacity to 0 opacity, or full transparency, to give us a little bit of a fade effect. Again, even in the most reflective surfaces, you typically don't. So at this point, we actually have the wet floor effect. But as I was going to say, to create a realistic wet floor effect, even in the most reflective surfaces, you very rarely see the entire reflection. So we want to take our complete transparency gradient offset, the one that's our alpha of 0, and we just want to slide it closer to our completely opaque offset. Alright, so that now we get our 100% transparency shows up a little bit closer down here. So that's looking a little bit more realistic. Let's run this and let's see what it looks like so far. So we're going to do project, we'll do test solution. Alright, so there we go. So you can see right there that we've got a really nice wet floor effect going on. So we've got our image here, and you get the perception that this is the floor and this is our wall. All right, so the image is sitting, much closer to us along the floor. All right, so this wall is a little bit off in the distance. We've got our image sitting here, and then we've got this really nice reflective floor that we see this nice reflection on. All right. Okay, so that's good, but there's more that we can do, and let's talk a little bit about how each one of these changes affect the wet floor effect. Well, the first thing that we can do is, obviously, unless you've got really crisp light and just a super transparent floor, the no part of the reflection is going to be completely opaque. So let's make sure our lower image is selected. Let's go to our gradient offset for our opacity mask where the alpha is 100%, and let's just click on that, and let's set that to, say, 85%. Alright. We can also click and hold your mouse down and pull down to drag that down a little bit. So let's drag it down to 70%, or somewhere around 70%. Alright. So now we've decreased the opacity right up next to our image as well. So now let's run that. Let's see what kind of a change that made. Alright, much more realistic. Alright, much more realistic. So now we've got a really nice wet floor effect here. So let's look at how we can modify the wet floor effect to create the perception of a different surrounding texture. And what I mean by that is this. Let's go down to this lower image, all right, and we have let's say we have our opacity mask set where we want it. All right. Now, let's take the opacity of the entire layer or the entire image, and let's take that down a little bit. So let's take that down to about 70%. All right. Now let's take a look at this. All right. So we still have a nice reflective surface. All right. We still got a nice little reflection going on here. But as we decrease the opacity of the entire reflection, we cause the floor to look a little less reflective. All right, so it looks a little more matte than it does shiny and reflective. Let's take this down to another step. So let's select that again. Let's take the opacity down to 60%, and let's run it. Just so you can see, visually, you can see that difference. So still a nice reflection, but you can tell by decreasing the opacity, what we've done is we've given the perception that the lighting has been decreased. So the lighting in the room that we have here is decreased, and the floor may not quite be as reflective. Now, if you want to make the floor even more dull looking, we can take and affect the gradient offsets. So let's move this gradient transparency offset up a little bit further. Something like that. So we have a very small amount of reflection. And let's test the solution. Okay, so at this point you see that we have a reflection here, all right? However, by doing that, we've given the perception that the floor is not as reflective, all right? So by doing that, we've still got the same amount of light, but the floor is a little more matte. And if you were to take this test and put it up next to the test where we had a little bit more of the image showing here in the reflection, and perhaps even take that one and bring the opacity up just a little bit, and you put them side by side, even though we know that this is just black, this color is just black color, you would look at that and perceptually you're going to see what appears to be a shinier floor or a more matte floor, even though we know it's really the same color. It's just a black, flat color. So that's how you can manipulate the wet floor effect to really kind of change the surrounding elements as well, and give the perception of more or less light and more or less reflectivity, which thus corresponds directly to shininess and slickness, or quote-unquote wetness of the floor.